The betrayal I never saw coming, my wife and my best friend. My name's Daniel. I'm 34. Been married to my wife Rachel for 6 years, together for 10. And if you asked me just 2 months ago who I trusted most in the world, I would have told you 2 names, Rachel and my best friend since high school, Tyler. We were the classic trio, me, Rachel, and Tyler. He was my best man at our wedding, gave the kind of speech that gets recorded and rewatched when you're drunk and nostalgic. I was the one who introduced him to Rachel. Never would have guessed I was setting myself up. Looking back now, there were signs. Nothing big, not at first. Rachel used to light up when Tyler was around, but she always had. He's one of those guys who walks into a room and instantly makes people feel like they're part of something electric. I never thought it was anything more than friendly chemistry. Besides, I trusted them both, completely. About 3 months ago, things started to shift. Rachel started working out more, dressing nicer, even when we weren't going anywhere. She started locking her phone. She used to leave it charging on the counter. Now it was always face down or in her pocket. I asked her about it once jokingly, and she brushed it off like I was being paranoid. Just trying to stay off social media, she said. Trying to live in the moment. Then there were the girls' nights. At first I was glad. She needed time with her friends. But they started getting more frequent. Every Friday night, like clockwork. Sometimes Saturdays too, and she'd come home late, always just a little too drunk, smelling like wine and lavender and someone else's cologne. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. You don't spend a decade with someone and assume the worst. You tell yourself you're imagining things. That stress from work is making you see shadows where there aren't any. But then came the day I found the receipt. It was a stupid thing, really. I was looking for my AirPods and checked her purse. I didn't find them, but I did find a crumpled receipt from a hotel bar. 2 cocktails, 1 beer, and a note scribbled in Rachel's handwriting. See you upstairs, R. My heart dropped. That was a Tuesday night. She'd told me she was at Emily's baby shower. I didn't confront her right away. I couldn't. My brain wouldn't accept it. Instead, I called Emily, played dumb, asked how the shower went. She was confused at first, then said, "Oh, that was last month. Wait, did Rachel tell you it was last night?" My stomach turned. Something broke in me that night. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at her as she slept. I wanted to shake her awake, scream, demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed to know the whole truth. And something told me this went deeper than I was prepared for. So I did what any sane, heartbroken man would do when he doesn't want to believe what's right in front of him. I hired a private investigator. I told myself I was being dramatic, that it would be a waste of money, that he'd come back with pictures of her doing yoga and drinking mimosas with her friends, that I'd be the asshole for not trusting my wife. But I had to know. The investigator was discreet, professional, and fast. Within 4 days, he had what I needed. Photos, time-stamped, Rachel and Tyler, holding hands outside a boutique hotel in the next town over, laughing over dinner, kissing in the parking lot, her head on his shoulder as they walked to his car. I remember staring at those photos like I was watching a movie, one where I was the fool in the background, the guy who didn't know his life had turned into a lie. The worst part? I wasn't even angry. I was numb. They say betrayal feels like a knife in the back. That's not true. It feels like nothing, like the world has gone silent and you're floating in a place where nothing makes sense anymore. That night, I sat in my truck outside Tyler's place. I almost knocked on his door, but I didn't. I just stared at the light in his window, wondering if she was in there too. The next morning, I skipped work. I told my boss I had the flu, but the truth was, I didn't have the strength to pretend I was okay. I sat at the kitchen table staring at a cup of coffee I never drank, waiting for Rachel to come down. She padded into the room in her robe, hair still damp from her shower, acting like the world was just fine. "Morning, babe," she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I flinched. She paused like she felt it, then sat across from me. "Everything okay?" I looked at her for a long time. I studied her face like I was seeing it for the first time. The little freckle under her left eye, The scar on her chin from when she fell off her bike as a kid, all the little pieces I used to love, all the lies now living underneath them. "Where were you Tuesday night?" I asked, voice flat. She blinked. "I told you. Emily's baby shower." "No, Rachel, that was last month." I talked to her. Her face went pale, not all at once, but in slow waves like color draining from a photograph. Her lips parted. She didn't say anything. "I found the receipt," I added. From the hotel bar, silence. I waited, gave her space to tell the truth, to do something that felt real. Instead, she said, "Why were you going through my purse?" That broke something in me. That was her instinct. Deflect, redirect, guilt trip. I stood up, walked to the drawer by the fridge, and pulled out the manila envelope the PI had handed me 3 nights ago. I dropped it in front of her. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. "I know it's Tyler," I said, finally saying his name aloud. "I have the photos." Rachel just stared at the envelope, frozen. I could see the moment her soul left her body. She started but stopped. Tried again. It wasn't supposed to happen. I laughed. A dry, dead sound that didn't feel like mine. That's what cheaters always say. "It started after you got laid off last year," she whispered. "You pulled away. You were always angry, always tired. I didn't mean to fall into it with him. It just happened." I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to scream that none of that justified sleeping with my best friend. But I didn't. I just stood there, heart racing, trying not to throw up. "Why him, Rachel?" I asked. "Of all the people in the world, why the one guy I trusted most?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Because he was there, because he understood, because he listened." I shook my head. "No, he was waiting. He was always waiting. I just didn't see it. We didn't talk much after that," she cried. I stared at the wall behind her. Eventually, she went upstairs to pack a bag. I didn't ask where she was going. I texted Tyler later that day. One word, "Come." He showed up 30 minutes later. I didn't let him in. We stood on the porch. He looked guilty. That was something, I guess. Still, I could barely look at him without wanting to put my fist through his face. "I'm sorry, man," he said quietly. I nodded. Not because I forgave him, just because there was nothing left to say. "You were supposed to be my brother," I said. "You were supposed to have my back." "I didn't plan it," he said, "but I love her." That hit harder than anything. Love. He loved her. That meant it wasn't just sex, it wasn't just a fling. It was betrayal wrapped in affection, in emotion, in connection. I stepped forward until we were nose to nose. "If you ever come near me again," I said, my voice low and shaking, "I will bury you. Do you understand me?" He nodded, then walked back to his car without a word. I stood on the porch long after he left. The sun was going down. A cold wind picked up. The house behind me felt hollow. Like a stage after the play ended, all I could think was, what the hell do I do now? After Rachel left, the silence in the house was a different kind of loud. It followed me like a shadow, through the hallways, into the kitchen, even in the shower. That strange, eerie quiet that you don't notice when someone else is around. Like the air itself was grieving. The first week, I didn't eat much. I lived on coffee and whiskey. I couldn't sleep in our bed, so I took to the couch like it was a war trench. Woke up stiff, angry, empty. Every morning felt like a rerun of the same nightmare. People talk about heartbreak like it's this sharp, sudden thing, but the truth is, betrayal is a slow rot. It eats you piece by piece. Tyler texted a few times. I didn't read them. I just watched the notifications come and go like waves hitting a shore I no longer cared about. Rachel didn't message me once. She moved in with her sister in Denver. I heard that through a mutual friend. I didn't ask for updates, but people love drama, especially when it's not their own. A couple of friends tried to reach out, invite me out for drinks or to watch a game. I turned them down every time. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to talk. I just wanted to not exist for a while. What hurt the most wasn't the betrayal. It was the realization that the two people who knew me best, the people who had seen me at my lowest and claimed to love me anyway, had looked me in the eyes and lied. Every "I love you," every hug, every plan we ever made, It all felt counterfeit now. After 2 weeks of doing nothing, I finally cleaned out our bedroom, her drawer, her closet space, her perfumes and lotions and yoga gear. I packed it all into boxes and left it in the garage. I didn't cry. I wanted to. Hell, I thought that might make me feel human again. But I couldn't. I was too angry, too numb. I started going back to the gym, at first just to burn the restless energy, but eventually it became the one place where my mind went quiet. I could lift, sweat, punch something, and for an hour I wasn't the guy who got cheated on. I was just a guy doing reps. Funny how pain becomes fuel when you've got nothing else. Therapy was my sister's idea. She booked the appointment without asking, said if I didn't go, she'd show up at my house with a baseball bat and a bottle of wine. So I went. Didn't say much the first session, just sat there while the therapist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, waited me out. Session 2, I cracked. I told her everything. About Rachel, about Tyler, about the guilt I carried, like maybe it was my fault somehow. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Stop trying to make their choices your responsibility." That hit me hard. Because I was doing that. I kept replaying moments over and over. The job I lost, the nights I came home too tired to talk, the times I didn't notice Rachel drifting. I kept asking myself, was I enough? But the truth is, people who cheat choose to cheat. No one slips and falls into someone else's bed. It's a betrayal built one decision at a time. And none of those decisions were mine. That was the first step in getting my power back. I started journaling. Not because I wanted to, because the therapist told me to. I wrote letters I never sent, to Rachel, to Tyler, to myself. It helped. One day I wrote, "You didn't deserve what happened, but you do get to decide what happens next." That became my mantra. And slowly, painfully, quietly, I started rebuilding. I changed the house, rearranged furniture, painted the walls, got rid of the couch where I slept those first weeks. I was still alone, still hurting, but I wasn't broken anymore. I was awake. It had been almost 4 months since Rachel left. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. I was sleeping better, eating like a human again. The gym and therapy were working their slow magic. I wasn't healed, not by a long shot, but I wasn't bleeding anymore either. And then came the message. It was a regular Tuesday evening. I was making dinner, grilled chicken, roasted veggies, trying this new thing called taking care of myself when I saw the notification light up on my phone. Rachel. First time in 123 days. I stared at the screen for a long time before I opened it. "Hey, I know I don't deserve a reply, but something happened and I thought you should hear it from me." That was it. No details. Just vague enough to punch the breath out of me. My hands started sweating. My mind spun out instantly. Was she sick? Pregnant? Did Tyler die in a freak accident and this was my cue to pretend I cared? I didn't reply. Instead, I left the food half-cooked on the stove and went for a walk. No phone, no earbuds, just the crunch of gravel and my heartbeat drumming in my ears. When I got back, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the message again. I didn't owe her anything, but curiosity, that terrible toxic human instinct, it ate at me. So I replied, "What happened?" 3 dots appeared instantly, like she'd been waiting for it. "Tyler and I broke up." I rolled my eyes. Not my problem. Then the second message came. "He was cheating on me." I let out a bitter laugh. Of course he was. People like Tyler don't change. They just move their target. I was the warning sign. She was the next fool who ignored it. Still, she kept texting. He was seeing someone else while I was still living with him. Said I was too emotional, that I was distracted by guilt. He gaslit me. Made me feel like I imagined everything. I see it now, how much of a coward he really is. I sat there, staring at her words, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just coldness. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she added after a pause, "for everything." I should have ignored it, but I typed, "You let him lie to me. You stood next to me while he toasted at our wedding. You chose him over everything we built, and now you want sympathy because he did to you what you did to me?" Read. No reply. Good. I dropped the phone on the nightstand and went back to my half-burnt dinner. ate it in silence. This time, the silence didn't feel so heavy. It felt like mine again. That night, I didn't dream about her, didn't think about Tyler either. I dreamed about hiking alone, some mountain trail I'd never seen, the kind with fog and pine trees and clean, brutal air that forces you to breathe differently. I woke up clear-headed. "Next day," Rachel replied, "I didn't text for pity. I know I lost you. I just needed to say it." That was the last message she ever sent. I didn't answer. What would have been the point? She wanted closure, but closure isn't something you give people. It's something they have to find on their own. I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't care. And that was the real peace. For a long time, I'd carried around their betrayal like it was my burden, like it defined me. But now, it was just part of the story, not the whole damn book. People always think forgiveness means letting someone back into your life. It doesn't. Sometimes it just means you finally stop bleeding over what cut you. I never legally changed my name, but for the first time in my life, I started introducing myself differently. I wasn't Dan and Rachel. I wasn't Tyler's best friend. I was just Daniel, one person, one story, my own. That realization came one random Thursday when I was at the DMV renewing my license. The woman behind the counter asked if I wanted to update my emergency contact. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Rachel's name had been there for years. Her number. Her is my in case of emergency, and for the first time in a long time I laughed, really laughed. Because wasn't she the emergency? I deleted her name. Entered my sister instead. It felt like cutting a rope that had been choking me. I started doing other things I'd avoided while I was married, simple things. Like weekend hiking, cooking messy breakfasts, leaving dishes in the sink without a fight, playing music loud again, sleeping sideways on the bed like it was mine, because it was. I didn't date, not yet. Not because I was scared, but because I didn't want to bring anyone into the mess of me while I was still rebuilding my foundation. People say, time heals everything. That's a lie. Time doesn't heal. Work heals. Therapy, truth, facing yourself in the mirror even when you hate the reflection. That's what heals. And one day, without noticing, I realized I'd gone an entire week without thinking about Rachel or Tyler. It wasn't some big moment. It just happened. That's when I knew I was actually moving on. Then, out of nowhere, came Emma. She was a friend of a friend. I met her at the backyard barbecue, standing near the beer cooler, wearing boots that didn't match the weather and a sarcastic grin that made my chest hurt in a strange, almost hopeful way. She handed me a bottle and said, "You look like someone who used to be married." I laughed so hard I almost choked. We talked for hours. She wasn't like Rachel. Emma didn't walk into a room like she owned it. She walked in like she'd been kicked out once and decided to come back anyway. She had a sharp tongue and soft eyes. She didn't ask about my past, but I offered pieces anyway. Not all of it, but enough to make it real. And she didn't flinch. One night, sitting in her tiny apartment above a flower shop she managed, she said, "You don't have to be perfect, just honest." That stuck with me, because I'd spent so long pretending I was okay, pretending I had the perfect marriage, pretending Tyler wasn't Tyler. But with Emma, I didn't have to pretend. We didn't jump into anything fast. It wasn't some whirlwind romance. It was slow, deliberate, gentle, like a song with no chorus, just verses that kept unfolding. And that was exactly what I needed. A few weeks into seeing her, I got another message. This time from a random number. "Just so you know, Tyler's getting married." That was it. No name attached, but I knew it was Rachel. I stared at it for a minute, then deleted the whole thread, the old messages, the new one, every digital breadcrumb. Gone. Because I didn't care. I didn't want to know who he was marrying. I didn't need to know if Rachel was still hurting. I didn't owe anyone my attention anymore. I closed the messaging app, turned off my phone, and went back to what really mattered. A glass of wine, a couch that finally felt like home again, and Emma leaning on my shoulder laughing at some bad Netflix comedy. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was present. Not haunted, not bitter, not broken, just here. and that was enough. It had been nearly a year since everything fell apart. Rachel was a name I didn't speak anymore. Tyler was just silence. And Emma had started leaving a toothbrush at my place, hanging her coat on the same hook Rachel once used, but it didn't feel like a replacement. It felt like a restart. Life was quiet again, simple. I had routines, I had peace. And then, one cold Saturday morning in February, I opened my front door and nearly dropped my coffee. Rachel, standing there like a ghost who didn't realize she was dead. She looked different, older, thinner, tired in that deep, soul-worn way that no amount of makeup can hide. She had a tote bag slung over her shoulder and held a small white envelope in both hands like it was radioactive. "Daniel," she said. I didn't say anything. My mouth was a war zone of shock and instinct. She glanced past me into the house. "Can I talk to you? Just for a minute?" I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "I don't think that's a good idea." "I know," she said quickly. I didn't even know if I'd actually come until I was already halfway here, but I need to say this in person. I crossed my arms. I said everything I needed to say the last time we talked. She nodded, then held out the envelope. "I'm not here to drag things up," she said. "No drama, just this, and then I'll leave." I hesitated, then took it. She didn't wait. She gave me a tight, exhausted smile, the kind you wear when you're trying not to cry in front of someone you once loved, and walked back to her car. I stood there watching her drive away, the envelope suddenly heavy in my hand. Part of me didn't want to open it, but I did. Inside was a handwritten letter, 3 pages, no fluff, no manipulation, just raw, painful truth. She wrote about Tyler, about how the cracks started showing a month after they moved in together, how he became controlling, paranoid, and cruel in small, dismissive ways. She said he had a new woman by month 4, that he gaslit her, isolated her from her own friends, even made her doubt her version of our story. But that wasn't the part that hit me. This was, "I never stopped loving you, I just stopped deserving you, and then, you were never the problem. I was the chaos. I brought the fire and blamed you for the smoke." The last page was an apology, not just for the affair, for all of it, for not fighting for us, for being too weak to face herself, for lying when she should have been honest, and for dragging me into a story I didn't agree to live through. And then she ended with, "I don't want you back. I want you free. I hope Emma is good to you. I hope you're good to yourself. I just needed you to know that it wasn't your fault. None of it." I read the letter 3 times. Each time felt like removing another layer of guilt I didn't realize I still carried. Then I folded it, slid it into a drawer in the hallway, and stood there for a long time, staring at the wood grain. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just breathed. Because for once, the past didn't win. That night, Emma came over. She kicked off her shoes, grabbed 2 beers from the fridge, and curled up on the couch like she'd been doing it for years. At one point, she looked over at me and said, "You okay? You seem lighter," and I realized I was. I smiled. "Yeah, ghosts don't scare me anymore." We clinked bottles. And for the first time since all of this began, I felt like I'd made it out the other side. Scarred, maybe, but still standing. Trust is a funny thing. You can lose it in seconds, but to build it back, that takes months, years. Sometimes it never really comes back. It just wears a new mask and waits to be tested. After Rachel's letter, something shifted in me. Not just with her, with everything. I had been living like trust was a fragile glass that had shattered once and would shatter again if I touched it wrong. But now I was learning to hold things more gently, especially Emma. She never asked for my full story. She never pushed. But one night, sitting in my truck watching the rain smear the windshield, I told her everything anyway. Not just the affair, the before, the after, the numbness, the anger, the part of me that still sometimes flinched when someone said, "I love you," too fast. She didn't say a word until I finished. And then she reached across the console, took my hand and whispered, "Thanks for not shutting the door." That moment didn't heal me, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Permission. Permission to feel loved again. Things with Emma moved slowly, purposefully. We didn't jump into labels, didn't plan our lives around each other. We just existed together, side by side. She'd spend a few nights a week at my place. We'd make late dinners, play terrible card games, share Spotify playlists, and weird childhood stories. She had this habit of falling asleep mid-sentence and waking up pretending she hadn't. I started sleeping in the middle of the bed again, not because I needed the space, but because she liked curling into my side. But still, that part of me, the one that had been gutted and stitched together wrong, didn't trust it completely. I'd find myself checking her phone screen when it buzzed, then hating myself for doing it. One night, I dreamt she was cheating on me. I woke up in a sweat, heart racing like I'd just lived it. She noticed immediately. Nightmare? I nodded. She didn't ask what it was about, just rolled closer, held me tight, and whispered, "You're safe." And that's when it hit me. She knew, not the dream itself, but the fear behind it. The paranoia, the suspicion, the leftover trauma from being blindsided once already. She never made me feel guilty for it. She just stayed. That's how I knew this was different. Then came the day we ran into Tyler. I didn't plan it. It was a Saturday. Emma and I were at this tiny bookstore/cafe downtown. She was looking at some vintage poetry books, and I was holding 2 coffees when I heard the voice behind me. Dan. I turned. There he was, Tyler. Same cocky stance, same smug smile, but something was off. A little heavier around the eyes, a little thinner around the soul. "Didn't think I'd run into you here," he said, trying to act casual. I said nothing. He glanced at Emma, then back at me. "So this is the new girl?" Emma stepped up, looked him in the eye, and said, "The only girl." Tyler gave a tight smile. "Look, man, I know I messed up. I cut him off. No." He blinked. "No what?" "No to this conversation, no to the apology, no to pretending we're just 2 guys who drifted apart." I wasn't yelling. I didn't need to. My voice was calm, controlled, final. "You made your choice. I made mine. Let's leave it at that." I turned away, took Emma's hand, and walked out. We didn't talk until we got to the car. She looked at me. "You okay?" I smiled. "I am now." That night, I lay in bed with her next to me, her breath steady and soft against my neck. And for the first time since Rachel betrayed me, I realized something I hadn't dared believe. I could trust again, not because people don't suck, but because not everyone does. And sometimes, when you burn the whole thing down, what you rebuild is stronger than what you lost. They say every story has an ending, but I've learned some endings don't slam shut. They just fade out slowly, like a song you didn't realize was playing until the room went quiet. 1.5 years had passed since I found that receipt in Rachel's purse, since the man I once called a brother kissed my wife behind my back, since my entire life split into 2 timelines, before the truth and after. I used to think that moment ruined me. Now I know it remade me. Emma and I never rushed anything, and I think that's what saved us. We didn't try to fix each other, we let each other heal. One night, she asked if I believed in second chances. I said yes, but only for people who earned them. She smiled and said, "Good, because I'm still figuring this all out, and you're the first person who hasn't made me feel like I have to hide my broken parts." I looked her in the eyes and said, "Same." There were quiet days, peaceful ones, simple joy, breakfast in bed, long drives with no destination, dumb board games that lasted too long. And there were hard days too, triggers, flashbacks, that strange, involuntary ache in my gut when I'd see a couple arguing in public and wonder if one of them had already betrayed the other. Healing isn't linear. It doesn't move like a staircase, it moves like a heartbeat. Up, down, forward, back, forward again. I never got revenge. Never shouted at Rachel, never punched Tyler in the face. That used to bother me. But now I see that peace was the most powerful revenge I could have chosen. I got an email from Rachel about 6 months ago. She was in therapy, said she finally understood what she destroyed, not just between us, but inside herself. She asked if I'd ever be willing to sit down and talk, not as lovers, not as friends, just as two people who once meant everything to each other and needed to lay the past down for good. I didn't reply, not out of hatred, out of kindness to myself. Some wounds don't need closure, they need boundaries, and I'd already closed that chapter in a much quieter, stronger way by not needing anything from her anymore. Not an apology, not an explanation, not even forgiveness. I'd already given all those things to myself. Tyler? I never saw him again. Rumor was, his new marriage ended just like the one he helped destroy. I can't say I was surprised. People don't change when they refuse to look in the mirror. But that's not my story to tell anymore. Last week, Emma and I went hiking up in the Blue Ridge Mountains. At the peak, we sat in silence, watching the clouds roll like waves across the trees. She leaned into me and whispered, "You ever think about where you'd be if none of it happened?" I did. I thought about it a lot, actually. I probably would have stayed comfortable, stagnant, blind to how disconnected I'd become from myself, from truth, from the kind of love that doesn't just feel safe, but seen. So I told her the truth. I think I'd still be asleep. She kissed my cheek and said, "Then I'm glad you woke up." This isn't the kind of story that ends with a ring. There's no montage of perfect pictures, no Instagram post with matching flannel shirts and a golden retriever. It ends here, in the quiet, with two people who found each other not because they were whole, but because they were honest. The pain didn't destroy me. The betrayal didn't define me. What defined me was what came after. The choosing, the rebuilding, the courage to love again, not despite what happened, but because of it. Because sometimes the ones closest to you will cut the deepest, but if you're lucky, the ones who come next will help you stitch the wound and remind you that scars don't mean the story's over, that this is the beginning of a new life.